What is going on, everybody? It is Friday, September the 24th, and that means it is time for my news radar. I think you guys can probably guess what we're going to be talking about today, but before we jump into that topic, I just want to say a special, massive, colossal, big thanks to everybody that did stop by for my Surface event live stream. I think we peaked at like 410 people, which is absolutely outstanding. The super chats were overwhelming. Probably the best birthday present I've gotten in a long time was from you viewers. So from the bottom of my cold heart, thank you. It means so incredibly much. So with that bit of sappiness out of the way, let's talk about that Surface event, because that's the news, right? That's the news that's going on. We're going to go over everything that was announced at that Surface event. I'm going to kind of give you my 2 cents. Obviously, when we get to the Duo 2 bit, I'll be a little bit truncated because, let's be honest, I've already talked about Duo 2 in another video, and I'm going to be talking about it in about 87.5 more videos over the next coming days and weeks. But still, we'll get a little bit of Duo 2 here. But let's start off with how they started the Surface event. And that was with the brand new redesigned Surface Pro 8, which does look quite a bit like the Surface Pro X. Now you can see most, I feel like, in the space around the screen, in the bezels, and the fact that the bezels are much, much smaller. We also have a couple of Thunderbolt ports there on the side. We have actually the same style type covered keyboard as we had on the Surface Pro X. The Surface Pen is tucked away in that little fold there. Apparently this deck is now carbon fiber, so less flex going on there all around. I think it's a pretty good upgrade, in particular when you talk about that 120 hertz refresh rate that's going to be packed in there. Something that they did not talk about at the event, but it is 120 hertz. Now, in terms of raw horsepower, Microsoft is saying that this is the biggest leap in performance that they've had since the Surface Pro 3. This thing might be about twice as fast as the Surface Pro 7, which was already pretty damn solid device. So this is a pretty powerful little tablet. Of course, this is running Intel's 11th gen processors. We would have liked to have seen the 12th, but with chip shortages and all that craziness going on, the 11th gen was probably what we were going to be stuck with anyways. And it sounds like performance-wise, we're really not going to be missing it too much. I think this is a pretty solid upgrade from the Surface Pro 7. From there, we talked about the Surface Pro 8's cooler little brother, the Surface Pro X, which did not receive nearly the big update or refresh that the Surface Pro 8 received. Pretty much all we got is, hey, it's running Windows 11, and there's an LTE-free Wi-Fi only version that's going to start out at $900. Not a lot going on for the Surface Pro X, but it still exists. They're still making it. After that, we did spend some time talking about the new Surface Slim Pen, which has got some cool, interesting things going on. It's not very different from the last Slim Pen, but now we do have haptics built in. So as you're writing with this thing on your Surface Pro 8 or your Surface Pro X, you're going to get a little slight vibration that is meant to mimic the feeling of a pen or a pencil gliding across paper, because obviously a plastic tip on a glass surface is very smooth, and that's fine, but most people grew up or are used to writing on paper to some degree. Maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, that won't be the case anymore. But this is meant to simulate that old feeling of drawing or writing on paper. And from what I've heard, it does an okay job at doing this. Now, the Surface Slim Pen is compatible with Surface Duo 2, although somehow the haptics are not compatible at the moment. It's just going to work like a regular pen. Of course, you can flip it around and use the eraser like an eraser. All that stuff is cool, but somehow Surface Duo 2 does not have all the bells and whistles with the Surface Slim Pen of it, but apparently that is coming at a later date. At that point, we got something kind of interesting and really different from what I was expecting. This is something that they are calling the Surface Adaptive Kit, and it's meant to help people who are disabled in some way by doing little things to help you be able to indicate, where does my charger plug in? You can line up the textures here and to figure out where you need to plug your charger in if that's something that is troubling to you. You see they've got the USB-C port marked there as well. You've got all manner of different things that you can mark and do things like that. Although I think that the coolest one for me is probably this little lanyard case. You can stick this to your laptop, the top of your laptop, or the hinge on the Surface, and then attach this lanyard to the back of it, which will allow someone that, you know, like this individual here that is in the situation that they're in, that would be a difficult task, opening just a simple thing. Opening a laptop or opening the hinge on your Surface Pro 8 or Surface Pro X, whatever, will be a challenge. We actually spoke with someone who has cerebral palsy, and he talked about using a fork to open up his Surface Pro tablet's kickstand, and that's heartbreaking to hear about people having to struggle with these things. So I'm really pleased that Microsoft is taking some steps and they're making products like this to enable people like these people to be able to enjoy their products just the same as anybody else. Really, really good stuff. And actually, somewhere right in that area, they talked about the new ocean plastic accessories like this mouse. And basically what they're doing here is this mouse is made, 20% of it is made by recycled ocean floating trash. As you may or may not know, there's a lot of garbage floating in the ocean because human beings are just the worst. So Microsoft apparently is scooping some of this garbage up out of the ocean and making a mouse out of it. And the box that it ships in, kind of cool too, is actually made from 100% recyclable materials. So just something to lower impact if you want to buy a mouse with, you know, and also kind of support these sort of environmentally friendly practices. Microsoft does have you covered there. At this point, we got into what everybody in my stream was looking forward to, and that was Surface Duo 2. And like I said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we got everything that we talked about in the leading days and weeks into this thing. We kind of knew what we were going to be getting. We are getting a triple camera setup, 12 megapixel wide, 60 megapixel ultra wide, 12 megapixel 2x telephoto. There's a time of flight sensor there as well to help with some portrait photography and things like that as well. Yes, the bump is real. I'm sorry if that bothers you, but it is. We did, of course, get that curving glass into the middle of the device. This was something that we talked about not that long ago as well. Another look there at that camera bump. The screens are a bit bigger. The chin and the forehead are a bit smaller, although not that much smaller. They're still pretty large. It is a 90 hertz refresh rate this time around, so that's going to make things look a lot smoother. Personally, you may disagree with me here, but I think 90 hertz is a good sweet spot because you look smoother, but you're not killing your battery too much. Speaking of the battery, we're going to jump up to about 4,400 milliamp hours from about 35-ish last time, so almost 1,000 milliamp hours. A larger battery, which is going to be needful because we have a Snapdragon 888 in here, 8 gigs of RAM, and that high refresh rate screen that are a little bit bigger as well. That's going to take a toll on the battery. So having a much larger battery, nearly, what would that be, like 20% bigger, almost 25% bigger battery, that's going to do a lot of good towards helping this thing be able to last all day. There is a selfie camera there in the front as well. And speaking of these curving screens, just like I talked about days ago, when you fold this thing over, the screens do roll through the outside, and there you can see your notifications on the outside of the device, which I think is a really good way to solve the I can't see my notifications without opening my Surface Duo problem that so many people complained about, even though it was something that really bothered me. It's a cool thing. I'm really happy to see it just because it's new, it's different, it's something that we haven't really seen done before. I know the Galaxy S7 Edge did something similar. This is a little different than that, being that it's on the spine of a folding device. Pretty cool. Of course, the Surface Slim Pen is compatible with Surface Duo. Like I mentioned, they're actually going to sell a snap-on magnetic case, which will allow the Slim Pen to actually stick to the Duo and will allow it to charge at the same time. Like we mentioned, again, days ago, there was wireless charging in Surface Duo. Well, it's not to charge the Duo, it's to charge this pen. I think a lot of people are also really happy to hear that NFC will now be on board as well. Of course, all in all, the hardware does to me look quite a bit better, and I can talk and say a lot of positive things about the hardware, but it's all going to come down to one thing, and that's the software. Does the software actually do a good job this time around? Do we get substantial updates? Is it stuttery? Does one screen shut off? Do these bugs persist? If they do, all the hardware in the world isn't going to make a bit of difference. We need to see improvement on the software side this time, and we're not going to know for a while exactly what's going on that front, but Surface Duo 2 announced, it's real, it's up for pre-order. There's a link in the description down below for that device, as well as many other devices I will mention in this video. And lastly, Microsoft unveiled the most powerful Surface that they've ever made, and I think a lot of people, when this popped up on the screen, did not know what to think. They were looking at this thinking, oh, look, they've made a MacBook Pro. That's effectively what this thing looks like when you see it, in its normal posture. It's kind of thick on the bottom. You've got some fan vents down here. You can see in this initial picture, the slim pin actually tucked away in that little gap down there. A lot of people were like, well, what are we looking at here? And then something crazy happens because that screen can tilt out away. It can actually fold down flat to be used as a tablet, basically. This thing is the new, what the Surface Book 4 was going to be is now the Surface Laptop Studio. This is a really strange design for a device, and honestly, it allows a lot of improvements over the Surface Book because now no longer is that tablet, really top heavy when it's sitting in the laptop mode. All the weight is in the bottom now, as makes sense. It's going to be quite stable. The screen is large. It's 120 hertz. The pin is able to be docked there underneath as well. As they move from laptop mode to what they call stage mode, which is at this angle, and then all the way down into tablet mode, where it is folded really quite flat like that on this big 14.4 inch screen. I think this thing looks really good. Granted, it's going to start out about $1,600. It's not cheap. It is running Intel's 11th gen hardware. If you get the i7, you can actually get an RTX 3050 instead of the Intel Xe graphics that comes with the i5. I believe that's correct from the early documentation. Sometimes that stuff comes out and it winds up being wrong a couple days later, but that's what I've read here on the listing on Best Buy's website. And you can actually do some light gaming on this thing if you wanted to. It obviously, picture editing, drawing, things like that would be very good on a device like that. Obviously, that was the shocker of the show, something that the patents had kind of hinted at, but we weren't sure if it was actually going to be happening until, honestly, right before it happened. Some of us knew, but, quite a big shock for many of us to see this thing unveiled. Personally, I think it was a really strong show. I think they showed a lot of cool stuff here at this Surface event. I'd love to know your take on everything I've just talked about in the comments down below. That is all the news I have for you today. Stay tuned for the next edition of News Radar every Monday and Friday. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.